Hey everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Bastock and Bachelor Bullshit Busters. Today we are going to be having a look at Google Analytics. It's a tool that a lot of people say they have plugged into their websites, but when asked, a lot of people haven't logged into it or don't know what to look for when they are looking into it. So myself and Adam today are going to take a very brief look over the dashboard elements of Google Analytics and give you a better understanding of what sort of data you can get out of it and how it can help you make some business decisions. So before we get too stuck into the details of the dashboard, Adam, do you want to sort of talk us through what Google Analytics is as a tool?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is whenever I'm speaking to business owners, they always get quite overwhelmed by analytics because there is so much information in here that it's very easy to look at it and just run away scared. Um, Essentially, analytics tells you how people are acting on your website. So it differs from some other tools which might tell you how they reach your website. But Google Analytics gives you all that information. So it will tell you where they've come from, how long they've spent on the site, what they've done on the site, such as email signups or certain conversions if you've got that set up as well, like what time of day they're on the site. It's kind of a really good, just broad tool that gives you a lot of data on how people are interacting with your business online. Um, and I think it does differ quite a lot to some other tools we might talk about, such as Google Search Console, which will only tell you about how you appear in organic search, for example, whereas analytics is far more, it's the full suite, it's the full house of how people are interacting with you.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing that a lot of businesses have plugged in. Generally, your web developer will have plugged it in, or if you're using Squarespace or Shopify, they generally prompt you to kind of get it set up. And obviously, a lot of other websites providers do provide their own analytics software. I guess what Google's able to do is give you a lot more context around the user behavior outside of your website and then link that into what's happening. So I think even if you're not using Google Analytics and you're just relying perhaps on the WordPress dashboard or the Shopify dashboard, it's definitely worth getting Google Analytics set up and taking a look just to see if there's some information there that might be able to help you. So let's take a look now at a website dashboard, and we can start to have a look at what it is you can actually do once you're inside Google Analytics.
Yeah. I think it's much easier once you've got something in front of you to walk through. So if you are watching at home, I'd recommend opening a dashboard and working along with it.
Yes, and also if you're listening along, we'll try and call out the boxes as we get to them so you know what we're talking about. But do check it out on YouTube if you need some visual guidance as to what we're talking about as well. So I think once you get to the dashboard, this is the first thing. It's called Home on Google Analytics. The first thing and the most obvious thing that a lot of people miss is this tiny box here, which is at the bottom of the first graph, and it just says last 7 days. If you click that and change it, you've got different time spans here you can go to. So choose the one that's most relevant for your business, but I'd recommend either last 28 days or previous month can be good for most businesses.
That's what I tend to use pretty much all the time, yeah, because it gives you a real good kind of month on month growth idea then at a snapshot. And that's something you can see here at the top left where it's got that dotted line that's slightly faint behind the thicker kind of blue line. That is the previous month's activity. So, and it could be comparing it for day, is it day by day, kind of like for like?
It
So
is,
if
yeah.
one weekend you saw a lot of traffic last month, that will appear here as like a drop, or here we can see there's actually an increase of 153% on this Sunday versus the Sunday last month. So it's a real good kind of snapshot just to see if you've grown or declined in the past month or so.
I think it can also help you identify from a trend point of view. As you say, here we've got a nice spike on the weekend this month, but last month there wasn't a spike on the weekend. So that's not saying that you have weekend traffic to the website. It's just saying that that particular weekend was a one off nice high spike in traffic. So it can help you identify that, which can be useful for making other business decisions about when you post on social or when you run your ads, that kind of thing.
Or
But
like, I think emails, sorry, are quite a common one there as well, where if you
yes.
send like an email campaign, that'll often pop it up.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll get to some other boxes below that can also help you make those decisions.
Yeah.
So the other thing to note is that if you've got an e-commerce website, you can plug in the revenue side of things. So it can tell you about direct sales that are made, and it can also tell you about your conversion rate. This site doesn't have a basket on it, so those features aren't there.
Mm.
So, Adam, do you want to tell us the difference here between sessions and users?
Yes, so sessions, it's quite a common one to get confused, and it always takes me a minute or two to think about it and clarify it. But so users are the amount of individuals that have been to the website, and then sessions is essentially how many times they've been to your site. So I might be researching something and find a blog post of yours on, say, the 1st of May, and then that counts as one user, and then I might return on the 14th of May to reread that article and find out more information again, and that would be my second session. So sessions will always be higher than users, or at least they should be, because you'll have users coming back more than once throughout their kind of journey life.
Yeah, I think that's a common one to get confused by, but that has certainly cleared that up.
Yes,
The next box is the blue box, which is called active users right now. So if someone's actually on your site and they're clicking around and doing things, you'll see this 0 here change to a number, maybe 1, 10, hundreds, maybe even thousands. But depending on the number of visitors you get, that number may be showing you on the site. And if it is, you do need to look at excluding your traffic. Especially if you spend a lot of time updating your own website. Otherwise, these figures could mostly be you. So in theory, even if you're on your site, that shouldn't just say 1. It's always important to try and make sure you're not in. We can send you a guide on how to block yourself from your own analytics, but it's a bit more detailed than we've got time for today.
it's
Don't
pretty
get
simple
too.
though.
It is very simple, but yeah, it's probably a bit more detailed. But don't get too stuck in on. Sorry, don't focus too much on this number in this box. It's not relevant to the majority of businesses. It's just a nice to have, a reassuring reminder that people are visiting your website. The next box, which is the insights box, I'll be honest, generally is throwing up very advanced ideas, and it can be very confusing. So I would take everything they're saying here with a pinch of salt. It's Google trying to be useful, but unless you're getting hundreds or thousands of visitors a day or a week, really the stuff they're talking about here just isn't for you. So I'd save your time and your worries and scroll on down to the next the next section.
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
next box here is how do you acquire users? So Adam, do you want to talk us through what we're looking at on this box?
Yeah, so this is the main box I'll tend to look at for a website, especially if I'm just coming to a business kind of quite new and just looking at how they acquire users. It will tell us and split it down based on a few categories, which I think if you hover over one of the bars, it should kind of bring up an example, split it here. So you'll have referral traffic, so that's people coming from other websites. So say there's a BBC article that talked about my brand and linked to my website, that would count as a referral traffic. Social, so anyone coming from Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, and I think sometimes YouTube gets caught in there as well. Direct, people who have got either your site saved in a bookmark or have typed it in directly, or sometimes it might be if they've come from an email or something like that that's not a kind of marketing email, it might pop up as direct. Organic traffic, organic search, which is just from Google. And then the other two that aren't displayed here, because this website's clearly not doing any of that activity, would be email kind of marketing, which it will automatically detect from like MailChimp or other systems. And then Google Ads traffic as well. So any paid search ads that are being run would come in here. So this is where it's really a good snapshot of what a percentage breakdown looks like of the traffic that's coming to your site. And for me, for example, if I come into a site and see that 80% of all traffic is coming from organic search, I know they're in a really good, strong position and that we can look at other channels there to kind of build upon. Whereas if it was 80% paid search, that tells me that their website is perhaps at risk of relying on that too heavily, and they might want to invest more in SEO as a snapshot decision that I take away from this information.
Yeah, because it can show you whether you're earning the traffic or whether you're buying the traffic. And earning traffic is through organic SEO, as Adam just said, and buying. If you're paying too much for your traffic and you're relying too heavily on the traffic, then the danger is that if the budget for that runs out and you have to turn it off, all of your traffic disappears with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, that earned and bought traffic is a really good analogy or phrase. It's not an analogy.
So the next box is where are your users, which has the world map on it. Again, this is more for most businesses. This is just an interesting box. It just gives you a snapshot of where people are. It's not 100% accurate, but it is a nice to have. Unless you are doing international shipping, I can't really see why this would be interesting. Perhaps if you're doing multi-language sites, again, could be interesting. But for most businesses, this is just a nice, interesting graph to have. So I won't spend too much time on that, I don't think.
No, I mean, very quickly just on that, the only time I found that quite interesting for me is when I've logged into a site that I'm kind of managing and seeing quite a high percentage of like US traffic, even though we're a UK-based company. And that normally comes from that organic search, is that a blog post might have been picked up in the US, for example, and there's a lot of traffic coming in there, and that's slightly skewing the traffic numbers. Um, so it's something, as you say, to keep an eye on. And normally, if you see that map, you'll go, "Oh, that's interesting," and then dig into it a little bit more. So
The other thing to note, just on a bit more technical level, is unless you've got your Google Analytics linked to MailChimp, all of the MailChimp traffic comes from the US.
right, yes, that's a very good point. I
But
hadn't
if
thought of
you
that.
just go into MailChimp and click on account integrations and then put your analytics numbers in there, then MailChimp will feed in the location data, which means this location data is then correct for the opening of emails.
Brilliant.
So let's have a look at the next box, which is when do your users visit? So this is, I suppose, growing on that top box in the right we saw, which is the number of visitors per day, which is good for seeing trends over the month. But then what Google have done is they've then taken every day and broken it down into the hours and the days of the week, and then you can see how many people are visiting at which hour on which day. So this can be really good for identifying trends, as Adam said earlier, about if you're sending an email and you're noticing that you always send an email on Tuesday afternoon, and then Tuesday afternoon is very dark blue, so you're getting all your visits on Tuesday afternoon, then you know that people are responding to your email quite quickly. Whereas if you've got a good SEO spread and if you're doing any paid ads, it's quite nice and spread out like we're seeing here, then you realise that you're not too reliant on one source of traffic at a particular time. So people aren't reacting to your traffic, they're just naturally engaging with your site on their own.
I think one of the interesting things here is you do start seeing patterns once you've got more traffic. So one of the sites that I manage, we see a lot of traffic on Sundays for some reason. We see like a 20% uplift on Sundays. And that's just from organic search. We've not done any marketing on Sundays that is additional to that. And we always see that higher engagement as people are researching. And also you might see things like lunchtimes or kind of evenings when people are doing that shopping or that kind of browsing slightly more, and that you know that might be when you want to support it with extra messaging at those times because you know people are active. So if people are normally on your site at Wednesday at 8 p.m, maybe consider sending an email to those people at that time as well to try and engage them when they are also engaged.
Yeah, yeah. Again, this is definitely a good one for email marketing. What time do users visit? It can definitely help, as you say. It's probably worth trying a morning nudge to see whether that gets people in the mornings or lunchtimes, evenings. It's probably worth spreading them out, testing, and this is how you can measure that.
Yeah.
So if we move down to the next row, we now go to the what pages do your users visit? So there's a bit of a common misconception with this homepage graph, isn't there, Adam, to do with pages and landing pages. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, there is a report within Analytics somewhere that will tell you which kind of pages people are entering into your site on. So whether they're coming into, say, the homepage or whether they're coming in via a blog post, and that would be defined as a landing page. So what page are they landing on your website as their first interaction? What this little box here is saying is actually telling us about all pages. So I might land on the homepage and then click onto 5 different pages, or I might come in on a blog post and then click on 10 different pages. What this is showing us is those total amount of page views. So what are the most popular pages on our site overall? It's a really important distinction, because it might be that because of your internal navigation or the way you've linked things on your site, that certain pages are getting more views than others. And that might not be based on how you want them to act or the reflection of how they're finding it externally to your site. But once they're on it, that's the page they always navigate to. So it's a real kind of, not minefield, but I think there's a lot of information in there for you to dig through and just look at and go, well, actually, what pages are people visiting the most, and why that might be. And then as you make changes to your site, you might start seeing those figures change as well.
Yeah, and I think just on a sort of snapshot view, as we're seeing here, we can clearly see on this site that the electric scooters content is the most popular by quite some margin. So I think what you can see here is actually, if you were going to be writing some more content, you might not want to focus on the electric scooters because that's actually doing quite well. What you might want to do is go down here to, some a bit further down and find actually, do you know what, that this content lower down the page could do with a bit of work, and then that
Yeah.
might boost that up. Don't necessarily just think that whatever's number one you need more of, because actually you might end up diluting the effectiveness of that top content. It's probably better to work on optimizing some stuff lower down and bringing it up.
I think
Yeah.
that's really important. I think 'cause quite often you might find what we call orphaned pages, of pages that basically aren't very easy to navigate to on the site. So if it's hidden only on one page in a 5 layered menu, the reason why the page views aren't very high is because no one can find the page. Whereas if you've got just one page in the navigation that is the only page that's getting any traffic, that'll be why as well. So yeah, I think definitely don't just read the top ones as the winners. I think the losers might be ones that you want to focus more time on.
Yeah, exactly. So the next box in, how are your active users trending over time? So this is another interesting one. It's quite similar, I guess, to the one we saw at the top, the main Google Analytics box at the top over time. Except this is telling you how many people are coming back per month, per 7 days, and per day.
Yeah, it's a bit harder to kind of grasp, but I think it is a far more. What this is telling us is more about the reinteraction rate of people. So the top graph was how people were finding us on a very kind of top level 30-day. Have they found our site? Yes, no. This one's looking at more, have they returned to our site? Are they active users over a longer period of time? And that's where we can see, like around the 10th of May there was clearly a jump in traffic to the site, and that's then kind of carried through over the next 30 days as those people come back more and more.
Yeah, I suppose this could be an interesting one. If you hadn't done any email marketing and then you started doing email marketing, that's the kind of result you want to see, those users coming back. And if you're sending a weekly email, then obviously your 7 day visits you would want to see be going up, because that suggests that people are reading and interacting with your email every week. I would say you'd have to have an incredibly popular site in order to be getting an increase in 1 day visits. Which obviously you may well have, but for most businesses, I would say probably the 30-day to 7 day are the ones to look at there.
I think they're just more valuable because it will reflect your kind of overall marketing and what you're doing generally as well.
Yes, yeah,
If you're suddenly doing more PPC and more, Facebook and social and email, as you say, you'll see that figure kind of climbing.
yeah. So the next box is called what are your top devices? So this is referring to the devices that people who visit your website are using. So on this website, we can see that we've got about 54% mobile, 36% desktop, and 10% tablet. So this is quite interesting because it means that all of the navigation choices, all of the image choices, and the copy length for this website need to be written for mobile and then desktop, because most visitors experience this on a mobile. So a big mistake that a lot of people make is they design their website on a desktop, they look at it on the desktop, they build it on the desktop, they sign it off on the desktop, and they only ever look at it on the desktop. And the first time they look at it on their mobile is potentially when they're showing their friends saying, "Oh, have you seen my website?" And they look it up on their phone and they think, "God, it looks terrible. How on earth do you use that?" And then they're surprised why their conversion rate on the mobile is so bad, or the revisiting rate on the mobile is so bad. So this is really important to get right, because you can win or lose someone in under a second. Maybe you've got between 1 and 3 seconds to win a customer, essentially, if your site doesn't work on mobile. So I would always recommend that most businesses check their website on a phone before they even think about the desktop anyway. But with a site like this, you can justify that decision incredibly well because you've got a 54-36 split.
I think it really goes both ways as well, because I've equally sat in kind of meetings with agencies who have really pushed that mobile first, which is absolutely fine and it should work on mobile. But a lot of the time it was more for B2B clients. Something like 80% of the traffic was coming through desktop, and that wasn't really being looked at or considered because the theme was mobile first. And that's why that's so important, is just to kind of really get a quick snapshot and go, well, actually, we do want it to be mobile friendly, but also desktop is the main consideration. So we want it to kind of act slightly better, or at least we want the conversions on desktop to be more prominent, because that's where people convert. People might be researching on mobile, but they might be buying on desktop, if that makes sense, because of the higher purchase point, or people are sat in offices. So that kind of graph is really good just to look at very quickly and kind of challenge what your preconceptions might be of how people work with your site.
Absolutely, yeah. Because the feeling that you have for how you use your site versus what your customers do, this is how they're actually doing it. So it can be really good. Um, I think also the e-commerce version of this is really interesting. Like if
Mm.
you've got e-commerce and you click through to the more detail, it actually tells you what your conversion rate is for the device as well. So just like Adam just said, it may be that all the research is happening on the mobile, but all the purchases are happening on the desktop. So you might want to look at your mobile checkout. You might want to look at ways you can make that easier. Lots of things you can do based on that, but a lot of what this is showing you is allowing you to actually use data rather than opinion to make these decisions. And sometimes I think that's where people, especially business owners who've got a lot on, are dealing with a lot of different factors, things they all need, they need to be experts in so many different fields. And this just isn't one that anybody's got time for. This just takes all of that guesswork away and just gives you the real data straight away, to say, right, well, actually, we need to focus on mobile here. There's no,
Yeah.
there's no question. It's just, that is just what the data is telling us. Um, so the last two boxes now, how well do you retain users? So again, this is quite similar, I guess, to this graph here with the returning visitors. This just gives you a breakdown of the drop-off rates per week. Again, this can be particularly useful if you're linking it to an email campaign or an ads campaign. You can see initially in week 1, obviously that's when all of your visitors came, but how many of them came back in week 2, 3, and 4? So your re-engagement rate here is clearly displayed.
I think this is really, really useful again for e-commerce, where you can see, well, we may be paying quite a lot of money on Google Ads, for example, to acquire someone on that first week, that day one purchase or day one, interaction. But if they're not following up on weeks 2, 3, or 4, then you've clearly lost them, and that click isn't as valuable as someone who might be then engaging with your brand and coming back and kind of researching slightly more. So again, I think it's a really good snapshot just to see, are people returning to your website, and if not, you might need to look at giving them a reason to. And this site is probably one that would suffer from that, where only 2% of people are coming back the following week.
Mm.
And it might be that, this isn't e-commerce, so it might be that's the way the site is set up, is that it's kind of designed to be a landing point, which then they go onto other pages from, or other businesses, or, a different step of their journey. But after week 2, there's just no information there. So, they're not coming back and looking at the site again.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Again, this is another way you can really start to measure the effectiveness of your marketing and customer engagement. And if you need customers coming back week after week, then this is probably a KPI graph for you. This is where you should be focusing, versus maybe a business like you said, which is very short, transactional. You're on, you're done, you're off. Then this isn't an important factor. And I think having this all broken out into different graphs like this means you can pick the graph that's important to your business and focus on it there. So thinking
Yeah.
about measuring the goals, the last box is how we're performing against the goals. So goals do not magically appear in analytics. That's a big misconception. You have to set them up. It's easy enough to do, and we'll probably do a whole other podcast on just how to set up goals, because it's quite an involved process in order to make sure it's working to help you measure your business. But in this website, this is all about customers either clicking links and then going off to another site. And some of those links have a value attached to them. So that's why we're seeing a goal value here. Now, if you're doing a lead gen process and you're selling a fixed product and you know what your profit margin is, you might want to put your profit margin in so that every time someone fills in a form, you know that that lead is worth X amount to you based on your conversion rate. And that will give you some goal values, and it gives you conversion rates and things like that. For most businesses, it's not quite that black and white. Obviously, if this was e-commerce, this whole chart is different because it's based on products. But what we're looking at here is links. So this is people clicking links which have monetary value. So it's telling you the number of people who've done that. But for most businesses, a goal is just someone filling in a lead gen form or the contact form. And then you can just see, okay, well, I've had 111 people fill in the contact form this month versus 4,000 visitors, so I know what my conversion rate is, and then again that can help you. It's another conversion rate, another KPI, you can use to help you make informed decisions about how well your marketing or your outreach is going.
I think that's kind of summed it up really nicely. I don't think there's anything more I want to say on that without us just diving into an entirely separate podcast on goals and kind of how valuable they are. But I think I'd start my only advice really would be start simple. If you've got a contact form, make sure you're tracking it. Don't try and do anything clever with it, and then build up from there. You can build on it, but don't try and track everything.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So the last two boxes we're seeing here are relating to Google Ads campaigns. So if you link your Google Ads to analytics, which you would do when you're setting Google Ads up, you can see some Google Ads data here, which just helps you kind of measure how effective they are. And then the last box is what are your top selling products? Well, obviously we're not running e-commerce here, so that box is blank.
Yeah.
So that there, I think, is the summary of the analytics dashboard. You can get more information by clicking through the menu on the left-hand side. There's lots of different reports to go into. And again, I think we could probably run an all-day session on what is in each of those reports and how you can use them. But to be honest, for most businesses, actually the information they need is sat right there on the dashboard. So I would encourage you all to dust off that login, go and have a look, see what you can see within that dashboard, and see if there's one metric or one graph you can use to measure what's happening on your website and in your business better.
I think as soon as you get onto that main dashboard and have a look at it, you'll start thinking of questions and going, why is that like that? Why isn't this like this? Oh my God, that's actually everyone's on desktop and no one's on mobile, or vice versa. It will start really prompting questions, I think, quite naturally, which then you can go on and explore later. But is that one dashboard, I think, is really good for just getting that top level view.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, enjoy logging into your Google Analytics, checking it out, and do get in touch if you've got any questions about something to do with Google Analytics. And we
Absolutely.
will look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.